The Kages were known as the most powerful ninjas in all the villages, but believe it or not, many of them were defeated by other ninjas. Just imagine how strong those guys must have been to take down ninjas with the title of Kage. Let's check out how each of these legendary Kages met their end. First up, Kazekage Hito. This guy was so badass that, all by himself and with just his own strength, he managed to unite the entire sand village around him and have everyone follow his command. But even all his strength couldn't save him from being assassinated in the Great First Ninja War. And that's how the ill-fated curse of the Kazekages began, which says that the entire Kazekage bloodline is doomed to die a tragic death, preferably by assassination. The second Kazekage, Shaman, was the bodyguard of the First Hokage, and it's said that he was a puppet master, maybe even the first Kazekage and the only one who controlled puppets. As no one could have imagined, the man was also assassinated, thus keeping up the tradition of all Kazekages so far, the first and the second. He also died during one of the first ninja wars, passing away like Hito at a young age. The third Kazekage, about whom much remains unknown, including his name, was considered the most powerful Kazekage of all, at least before Gaara, and maybe even after. The third was the first Kazekage to study the powers of the one-tailed Bijou and to create his jutsu based on the abilities of the one-tail's sand control. He combined this with his own magnetism control ability, which led to his signature technique, controlling iron sand. The third met his end at the hands of our dear little Sasori-sama, who kidnapped him, captured him, and finished him off just to make a puppet out of him because he thought he looked cool. But the third story doesn't even end there because his body was used for a long time, basically retaining the same abilities he had when he was alive. And at a certain point, during the confrontation between Sasori and Orochimaru, the Snake Uncle brought the third back to have his revenge against Sasori. Fourth Kazekage Raza. Raza was considered a lousy Kazekage. The guy basically just screwed everything up, even though he was a powerful ninja who could control gold dust sand. As Kazekage, he was a tyrant, and among all the other crap he did, the worst was teaming up with Orochimaru to try to stage a coup against Konoha. And not only was he bad, he was also stupid because he trusted the Snake King, who ended up killing the fourth Kazekage Raza with a little stab in the gut, using the Kusanagi sword in a total backstab, of course. Fifth Kazekage Gaara. Despite little Gaara-sama, the craziest young psychopath there was, after Naruto's taught no jutsu, he turned into a good man. Even though he's alive these days, walking around with that cow-licked hair, he actually did die once. That happened during the Akatsuki attack on the Sand Village, where Deidara was his opponent. In a really intense fight, despite Gaara's incredible abilities, Deidara used the village as a hostage and managed to defeat Gaara with a cheap shot. Gaara was then taken to the Akatsuki hideout where his Bijou was removed, which automatically kills the Jinchuriki. So Gaara really did die. However, Granny Chiyo, with her special jutsu, traded her own life, which was already on borrowed time anyway, for young Gaara's. First Mizukage, we don't have much information about the old man, but one thing's for sure. The fact that he lived to that age shows just how skilled and powerful he was. Back in his day, my friend, it was all gunfire and explosions, and for a guy to survive all that and probably die of old age, nobody really knows for sure. Second Mizukage, Jinjetsu, the young little psycho was from Suijetsu's clan, so his main ability was controlling water. The guy was a beast, so much so that when he died at the hands of Mu, he didn't go alone. He took the mummy down with him. Third Mizukage, also one of the most mysterious Kages in history. He was the bodyguard of the first Mizukage, and it's said that he was the Mizukage who started the infamous nickname of the Village of the Mist as the Bloody Mist Village, with those loving exams among the little students. Fourth Mizukage Yagura was the youngest Mizukage of all. The boy was the Jinchuriki of the Three Tails and was a prodigy in terms of abilities. However, nevertheless, Yagura, even though he was a kind-hearted young man, had a terrible term as a crappy tyrant, but not by his own will. Yagura was basically controlled throughout his entire time as Mizukage by the most rebellious ninja of all, Obito-san, who made little Yagura-sama do a lot of messed up things. In the end, the Mizukage dies after finally breaking free from Obito's Genjutsu and not being able to handle the trauma of everything he had done. But this already makes it clear that Yagura's Bijou didn't really like him, or maybe he just didn't have much control over it, because we know that a Jinchuriki who really controls their Bijou doesn't fall for Jinjutsu, right? Not even from a Uchiha. The fifth Mizukage, Mei Terumi, one of the greatest beauties in the Naruto anime, is still alive today, but she almost died in the fight against Madara-sama. However, in the current Boruto anime, they committed one of the biggest sins I've ever seen in this series, which was making the fifth Mizukage look unattractive, even though she was easily one of the top beauties in Naruto. The first Tsuchikage was also one of the Kages we barely had any information about. What we do know is that he was from the clan that controlled insects, specifically bees, and he also had the ability to fly just like the others from his lineage. However, the circumstances of his death are unknown. The second Tsuchikage, Mu, this guy was a real badass, my friend. We didn't know much about him before, but during the war, we saw the damage this little punk could do, didn't we? He was the first user of one of the most overpowered jutsus in the Naruto world, the dust style, which, if it hits you, my friend, turns everything to dust. Besides many other abilities, like creating real clones and flying around, Mu also died in an epic way, facing off against the second Mizukage, Jinjetsu, who was also a powerhouse, and both of them ended up dying in their battle. Inoki, one of the Kages who held the position the longest. Old man Inoki was seriously tough, also mastering dust style, flying, and causing all kinds of chaos everywhere. The old man really made a name for himself in the Fourth Great Ninja War, helping the Shinobi Alliance a lot, and was almost still alive to this day, with hundreds of thousands of years under his belt. However, at a certain point in the Boruto anime, the old man, while protecting his comrades, couldn't handle the strain and ended up passing away, leaving the title of Tsuchikage to his. I think it's his granddaughter. First Raikage. He was basically the first Kage to kick the bucket, since his village was one of the first to get into conflict after the big meeting of the First Hokages, which was kind of a peace treaty that he didn't respect for very long. Second Raikage. He was taken out by some guys who loved taking down Kage, the Gold and Silver brothers, who at the time were trying to stage a coup and needed to get rid of the Raikage to do it, and they actually managed to pull it off. Third Raikage, considered the most powerful Raikage of all, the old man was a beast. Before they could find a perfect host to seal the Bijou, the Raikage used to fight the Eight-Tails Bijou almost every day. And if that wasn't enough, his death was even more epic. He faced an army of 10,000 ninjas, and died on the third day after taking out who knows how many of them. The fourth Raikage is still alive and kicking, but he was also one of those who almost met the afterlife fighting against little Madara. By the way, Madara was actually pretty nice to those allied Kages, right? Because he didn't really go all out on any of them. He just gave those guys a few slaps so they could learn their lesson. And even though he's still alive, the fourth Raikage has already passed his title on to Darui, who's also still alive to this day and is the fifth Raikage. First Hokage Hashirama Senju, known as the god of Shinobi and basically the guy who created the title of Kage. The strongest ninja of his time didn't meet his end at the hands of any other ninja. Actually, the cause of his death is unknown, but the most accepted theory is that Hashirama died because of his regeneration jutsu, which caused his cells to lose their lifespan. That's how Hashirama, the legend, died pretty young, passing the title of Hokage to the second one at a very young age. And now let's talk about him, the second Hokage Tobirama Senju, the scourge of the Uchiha. The young man with white hair, our Tobirama, was without a doubt one of the strongest ninjas in history, having created monstrous jutsus like Edo Tensei and Hiraishin. But despite all his strength, Tobirama was killed in a war ambush. At one point, Tobirama and his team were surrounded by enemy ninjas, and he knew that at that moment, even if his whole team fought, it was very likely that they would all be done for. So Tobirama sacrifices himself, tells his team to run, and stays behind as a distraction to try to defeat the enemies. But unfortunately, he doesn't succeed and is taken out by the brothers known as Gold and Silver. But even though the enemies were powerful, what most likely happened is that Tobirama was already exhausted, and at the time of that ambush, he didn't have the strength left to fight at his best and win, because despite everything, he was stronger than all the enemies there. Third Hokage, the third one, who was the Hokage for the longest time and also one of the ones who messed up the most, having let Orochimaru go after he had experimented on and used villagers from his own village as live test subjects, having let little Naruto grow up neglected, ended up dying at the hands of his former student, little Orochimaru-sama, who at the time wanted to stage a coup in Konoha. But little did he know that the old man still had some fight left in him. He fought toe-to-toe against Orochimaru and the first two Hokages. The old man was tough, and in the end, he even managed to seal Orochimaru's arms, basically taking away all his jutsus and stopping the coup. But he couldn't prevent his own death inside the seal he had to use, the Shikifujin, ending up trapped inside the belly of the demon. Him, the first, and the second. Fourth Hokage, Minato Namikaze, the cutest blonde guy in Konoha and one of the youngest Hokages ever, was the Hokage with the shortest time in office. Minato-san, even though he was the most powerful young prodigy in the Hidden Leaf Village, would definitely have become the most powerful Hokage in history if he'd had more time. But, however, nevertheless, he met his end at the hands of Obito-san, the devil's own angry ninja. My god. That's already the second one to fall at the hands of this menace who invaded the Hidden Leaf Village, kidnapped the man's son, kidnapped the man's wife, and still wanted to destroy his village. And even though he took quite a beating from little Minato, the fox he had summoned finished the job and impaled our young blonde guy. Fifth Hokage, Tsunade Senju. The old lady is still alive, but she was also one of those who almost met her end at the hands of little Madara-sama, having already passed her position to the sixth Hokage, Cool Kakashi, who, although still alive in the story, just like little Gara-sama, also bit the dust back in the Naruto anime. That happened during Pain's invasion of Konoha, where Kakashi jumps in, all fired up, to take on Pain. There, after a legendary fight, Kakashi shows that you really can die if you overuse your jutsus. He used the Manjikyu Sharingan more times than he could handle, and in doing so, saved Choji, who provided crucial information about Pain, which helped in the villain's defeat. And lastly, we have the seventh and most legendary Hokage of all time, little Naruto-san, who, even though he's still alive in the Boruto anime, is kind of in a coma in that hellish other dimension where Kawaki put him. That's it, guys. Did you enjoy the video? Then subscribe, leave a like on the channel, give us that support, and don't